What if the Bible you've read your entire life is missing something? Not a verse, not a chapter. Entire books, buried, banned, and forgotten for centuries. These are the forbidden texts, the writings they didn't want you to find. The history of the Bible is not just a story of faith, it's a story of power. Councils of men decided what was sacred and what would be destroyed. But some of those texts survived, hidden in caves, locked in monastery vaults, sealed in clay jars. And when they were finally rediscovered, they shook the foundations of religion itself. Tonight, we're opening the vault. These are the books removed from the Bible and the secrets they contain. Let's start at the beginning. How does a book make it into the Bible in the first place? It wasn't handed down perfectly from heaven on golden plates. It was a process, messy, political, and very human. For the first 300 years of Christianity, there was no official Bible. Different communities read different texts. Some read books we've never heard of. Then came the year 325 AD, and everything changed. Emperor Constantine called the Council of Nicaea, a gathering of Christian bishops from across the Roman Empire. The goal? Unify Christianity under one set of beliefs, one set of books. What got included shaped civilization. What got cut was meant to vanish forever. But the cut texts had other plans. The first forbidden book we're looking at is one of the oldest and most explosive. The Book of Enoch. Enoch was a man in Genesis who walked with God and then simply vanished, taken to heaven without dying. For centuries, Jews and early Christians believed Enoch wrote down everything he saw up there. And what he allegedly saw was terrifying. The Book of Enoch describes angels who abandoned heaven, who came down to earth, who took human wives. Their children became giants, monstrous beings called the Nephilim, who brought violence and corruption to mankind. God watched this happen, and God was not pleased. This is the backstory to Noah's flood that the Bible gives you only a glimpse of. Enoch's book fills in everything the Bible left out, and it's terrifying. The fallen angels had names: Azazel, Semjaza, Didache, each one responsible for teaching humanity forbidden knowledge. Azazel taught men how to make weapons of war. He taught women how to use cosmetics to seduce. God blamed Azazel personally for corrupting the earth. And in the Book of Enoch, God's punishment was brutal. The fallen angels were chained in darkness until Judgment Day. This book was quoted in the New Testament. The Apostle Jude referenced it directly. Early church fathers loved it. Tertullian called it authentic scripture. So why was it removed? Because it raised uncomfortable questions about the nature of angels, about free will, about where evil really came from. The official church wanted clean answers. The Book of Enoch gave them complicated ones. It was officially rejected at the Council of Laodicea in 363 AD. For over 1,000 years, the Book of Enoch was considered lost to the Western world. Then in 1773, a Scottish explorer named James Bruce traveled to Ethiopia and found it. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church had preserved it all along. They never stopped treating it as scripture. When Bruce brought copies back to Europe, scholars were stunned. They were reading words no Western eye had seen in over a millennium. But the Book of Enoch wasn't alone in that vault. Let's talk about the Gospel of Thomas. Not a story about Jesus, not miracles, not the crucifixion. Just words, 114 sayings allegedly spoken by Jesus himself. It begins with a stunning claim: whoever finds the interpretation of these sayings will not experience death. These weren't the gentle parables of Matthew or Luke. Some of these sayings were strange, challenging, almost impossible to understand at first. The kingdom of heaven is spread out upon the earth, and men do not see it. Split a piece of wood, and I am there. Lift up the stone, and you will find me there. Jesus, present in everything, in wood, in stone, in the ordinary world around you. This wasn't the church's Jesus. This was something more mystical, more direct, more personal. The Gospel of Thomas was discovered in 1945, buried in a clay jar in the Egyptian desert near a town called Nag Hammadi. A farmer named Muhammad Ali al-Saman dug it up and nearly used the papyrus as kindling for a fire. He didn't know he was holding one of the most significant religious discoveries in human history. The Nag Hammadi library, that single buried jar, contained 52 texts that had been hidden for 1,600 years. Who buried them? Likely monks from a nearby monastery, hiding them from church authorities who had ordered all heretical texts destroyed. They buried their library to save it, and it worked. The Gospel of Thomas wasn't just mystical. It was politically dangerous, because it suggested that you didn't need a priest. You didn't need a church. You could find God yourself, inside yourself. That idea threatened the entire power structure of organized Christianity. So it was declared heresy and buried, literally. Now let's go even deeper into that Nag Hammadi jar. The Gospel of Philip, one of the most controversial texts ever associated with Christianity. It describes a relationship between Jesus and Mary Magdalene that the church has spent 2,000 years trying to suppress. The text says Jesus loved her more than all the disciples, and that he would often kiss her on the mouth. The other disciples were jealous. They asked Jesus, "Why do you love her more than all of us?" Jesus answered with a question about light and blindness, about those who cannot see what is right in front of them. Was Mary Magdalene his most important disciple? His spiritual partner? His companion in a deeper sense? The Gospel of Philip suggests a version of early Christianity where women held sacred roles that were later erased. History is written by the winners, and in the early church, the winners were very clear about who could hold power. Women could not. And any text that suggested otherwise had to go. But Mary Magdalene had her own gospel, and it's even more startling. The Gospel of Mary, discovered in Cairo in 1896, is the only gospel in existence attributed to a woman. In it, after the resurrection, Jesus appears to Mary first. He gives her a private teaching, one he never gave the male disciples. He tells her about the nature of the soul, about how it rises through different levels after death, about what it faces on the way to God. Mary goes to the disciples and shares what Jesus told her. Their reaction: anger, disbelief. Peter, the rock of the church, challenges her directly. Did he really speak with a woman in private, without our knowledge? Should we all turn and listen to her? Did he prefer her to us? Another disciple, Levi, defends her. He says Jesus knew her fully and loved her more than any of them. This text describes a power struggle that happened in real time, right after the resurrection. A fight over who gets to speak for Jesus, who gets to lead, who gets to tell the story. Peter won that fight. Mary's gospel was buried. And for nearly 2,000 years, her voice was silenced. Let's shift to a book that didn't just get removed from the Bible. It got the people who believed in it burned alive. The Book of Jubilees. Also called the Little Genesis, this text was considered scripture by the Dead Sea Scroll community, the Essenes. It retells the entire story of Genesis and Exodus, but with details the Bible leaves out, and those details are wild. In Jubilees, time itself is organized in 50-year cycles called Jubilees, a cosmic calendar that controls all of history. It describes a special class of angels called the Angels of the Presence. Being so holy, they were circumcised at birth, just like Abraham's descendants. It gives names to people the Bible leaves anonymous: Noah's wife, the wives of the patriarchs, previously nameless women, finally given identities. It describes demons, specifically a chief demon named Mastema, who was allowed by God to keep a portion of the fallen angels under his control. To test humanity, to accuse them before God, the original adversary, before Satan had that role in mainstream scripture. Like the Book of Enoch, Jubilees survived only in Ethiopia, preserved in the Ethiopian Orthodox canon for 2,000 years. The Dead Sea Scrolls confirmed it was widely read in ancient Israel. 15 separate copies were found at Qumran. 15 copies. That's more than almost any other text found there. This wasn't a fringe book. This was a beloved, sacred text, read and copied for generations. Then someone decided it didn't make the cut. Now let's talk about the Apocalypse of Peter. Not the book of Revelation that made it into the Bible. This is something different, something older, and far more graphic. The Apocalypse of Peter is the first ever detailed description of hell in Christian writing. And what it describes makes modern horror movies look gentle. In vivid, specific detail, it describes sinners being punished in ways that match their specific sins. Those who committed murder, hanging by their hands over a pit of fire, forever. Those who committed adultery hung by their hair or their feet, flames climbing their bodies. Blasphemers, with their lips cut off, fire poured into their mouths. This text shaped the entire Western image of hell. Dante's Inferno borrowed from it. Medieval art was inspired by it. And yet, it was cut from the Bible. Why? Partly because it was too graphic, partly because it raised uncomfortable theological questions. But mainly because at the end of it, Peter asks Jesus if the righteous can pray for the damned to be forgiven. And Jesus says yes. That idea that hell might not be permanent was too dangerous for the church to allow in Scripture. If hell has an exit, it changes everything. The entire system of fear and obedience collapses. So the apocalypse of Peter was cut, the eternal hell remained, and the exit door was sealed. Let's go back further. Before Christianity, before the New Testament, to the oldest forbidden book on our list, the Book of the Wars of the Lord. The Bible itself mentions this book. Numbers chapter 21 verse 14 says, "As it is written in the Book of the Wars of the Lord." The Bible quotes from a book that no longer exists. We have no copies, no surviving fragments, only that one reference, like a window into a room that was walled off centuries ago. What was in it? Scholars believe it was an ancient collection of war poetry, battle hymns celebrating Israel's early military victories, songs of conquest, of bloodshed, of a God who fought alongside his people in ways far more violent than what survived into canon. It's a ghost, a reference to a sacred text that was deliberately allowed to disappear. And it's not alone. The Bible also mentions the Book of Jasher, the Book of the Acts of Solomon, the Annals of King David. All cited, all gone, a library of lost scripture, referenced and then erased. Now let's talk about a text that didn't just challenge the church, it challenged the nature of God himself. The Gospel of Judas. For 2,000 years, Judas Iscariot has been the ultimate villain of the Bible. The betrayer, the man who sold Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. But what if Judas was the hero? The Gospel of Judas, discovered in Egypt in the 1970s, analyzed by National Geographic in 2006, tells a completely different story. In this gospel, Jesus asks Judas to betray him. It was a sacred mission, not a crime. Jesus tells Judas, "You will exceed all of them, for you will sacrifice the man that clothes me." The betrayal wasn't weakness, it wasn't greed, it was obedience to the deepest request Jesus ever made of anyone. Judas did what no other disciple had the courage to do. This text belonged to a Gnostic group called the Cainites, who believed the villains of the Bible were actually the heroes. Cain, not Abel, the serpent in the garden, not God. A complete inversion of everything Christianity teaches, and it was spreading until the church crushed it. Irenaeus of Lyon, one of the early church's most powerful figures, personally condemned the Gospel of Judas in 180 AD. He called it a, quote, fictitious history. He made sure no one would take it seriously. 1,400 years later, it surfaced in an Egyptian antiquities market, crumbling, damaged, barely holding together. But enough survived to read, and what it said changed everything scholars thought they knew about early Christianity. Let's talk about the Book of Tobit, a book that was actually in many Bibles for over 1,000 years. It's in the Catholic Bible right now, and in the Eastern Orthodox Bible. It was in the original King James Bible of 1611. Protestant Bibles removed it in the 1800s, just quietly took it out, and most people never noticed. Tobit reads like a religious adventure story. A blind Jewish man, a demon named Asmodeus, who kills every man who tries to marry a young woman named Sarah. The angel Raphael, traveling in disguise, helps a young man named Tobias win Sarah's hand, defeat the demon, and restore his father's sight. It's vivid, it's dramatic, it's full of angels and demons and miraculous healings. It also contains some of the most practical wisdom in all of ancient religious literature. What you hate, do not do to anyone, written 400 years before Jesus, said nearly the same thing. The Book of Tobit was considered sacred by Jewish communities, early Christians, and the Catholic Church for centuries. Then Protestants decided it was apocryphal, meaning of uncertain origin, and out it went. One decision, one council, one vote, and an entire book of scripture vanishes from millions of Bibles. That's the power these councils had. That's the power they used. Now let's go somewhere darker. The Testament of Solomon. This ancient Jewish text, probably written between the 1st and 5th centuries AD, claims to record the magical practices of King Solomon himself. Not wisdom, not proverbs, magic. In this book, God gives Solomon a special ring engraved with a pentagram that gives him power over demons. Solomon uses the ring to capture demons one by one. He interrogates them. He forces them to reveal their names, their powers, and their weaknesses. Then he puts them to work, building the temple in Jerusalem. The demons who built the holiest building in the ancient world. That's what this text claims. Each demon has a specific angelic name that can defeat it, a specific prayer, a specific countermeasure. This text became the foundation of an entire tradition of ritual magic that ran parallel to mainstream religion for centuries. Grimoire, magical handbooks, exorcism rituals, many of them trace back to the Testament of Solomon. It was never considered scripture, but it was never fully suppressed either. It survived in the shadows of religion, copied and recopied in secret. It represents a version of faith where Solomon wasn't just wise, he was a wizard, and God gave him the tools to be one. Let's turn to a text that deals with the very first moment of creation and changes everything about how you understand it. The secret Book of John, also called the Apocryphon of John. This Gnostic text presents the most radical alternative to Genesis ever written. In mainstream Christianity, God creates the world and it is good. In the secret Book of John, the God of the Old Testament is not the true God. He's an imposter, a lower being called the Demiurge, a blind, arrogant creator who thinks he is God but is not. The real God, the true divine light, exists far above this false creator in a realm of pure spirit. When the Demiurge created humanity, he trapped divine sparks of light inside physical bodies, inside matter, inside prison cells of flesh. The serpent in the Garden of Eden? In this text, the serpent is the good guy. The serpent is trying to free humanity from the Demiurge's control. Do not eat from that tree, according to this gospel, was the false god trying to keep humans ignorant and dependent. The serpent told them the truth, and they were punished for seeking knowledge. This inversion, this complete flipping of good and evil in Genesis, was the most dangerous idea in the ancient world. It meant that the God of Moses, of Abraham, of the entire Old Testament, was a fraud. The church didn't just ban this text, they hunted down everyone who believed it. And yet, it survived. Multiple copies were found at Nag Hammadi, beautifully preserved, patient as stone. We're getting close to the end, but we have one more book to cover, and it might be the most important one of all. The Didache. The Didache, meaning the teaching, is believed by many scholars to be the oldest Christian document outside the New Testament itself. It may predate the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. It describes exactly how the very first Christians lived, what they ate, how they prayed, how they baptized, how they ran their communities. And what it describes looks almost nothing like modern Christianity. The Didache describes a church with no permanent priests, no bishops, no hierarchy. Any traveling prophet could lead the community. Any righteous person could perform the Eucharist. The church was a community of equals, bound by practice, not by rank. It also describes a concept called the two ways, the way of life and the way of death. The way of life begins, love God, love your neighbor, do not do to others what you would not want done to you. Simple, direct, no doctrine, no theology, no complicated creed. Just be good to each other. The Didache was considered scripture by many early Christians. Athanasius, the same man who helped finalize the New Testament canon, mentioned it, but it didn't make the final cut. Why? Because a church of equals with no permanent hierarchy was not the church that Rome wanted to build. The Didache described a faith that didn't need bishops, didn't need popes, didn't need an institution. That made it revolutionary, and dangerous, and quietly removable. So here we are, standing at the edge of what the Bible is and what it could have been. A Mary Magdalene whose voice was silenced for 2,000 years. A hell with an exit, a creation story where the serpent told the truth. A Mary Magdalene whose voice was silenced for 2,000 years. A hell with an exit, a creation story where the serpent told the truth. These weren't fringe ideas. These were the beliefs of real communities, real people who prayed, who suffered, who hid their scriptures in jars and caves so that someday someone might find them. And someone did. The question isn't just what these books say. The question is, who decided you shouldn't read them? And why? Power has always controlled the story. The story has always shaped what people believe, and what people believe shapes everything. Every book that was buried for a reason. Every council that voted to exclude a text had an agenda. That doesn't mean the Bible is wrong. It means the Bible is incomplete, by design. That doesn't mean the Bible is wrong. It means the Bible is incomplete, by design. And the missing pieces, the forbidden pieces, are finally coming back to light. These books survived. Against all odds, against fire and orders, and the slow erasure of time. They survived because truth has a way of outlasting the people who try to bury it. If you made it this far, thank you. This is the kind of history that most people never get to hear. Share this with someone who loves history, someone who loves truth, someone who's never afraid to ask the questions that make people uncomfortable. Because those are always the most important questions of all.